Hi, folks. You're at Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about this. There's quite a lot of movies, propaganda movies, doing the rounds in African, made by Western NGOs, George Soros type, and with United Nations donations. So clearly, the globalist activist cabal are making these movies, and they're putting them out amongst. Well, you can see them in Europe with subtitles and in Australia with subtitles, but they're aimed at primarily at A, an African audience, and then B, justifying to white, leftist, especially girls, women, the mass migration from Africa is just how it is. I mean, it's just natural, organic. It's how it is, and if you have a problem with it, then you're a fucking Nazi. But the movies are pitching primarily, I think, and they're showing it for free all around Africa and African schools and this sort of thing. That you should go to the West. It's a natural progression of where you are. You're poor. You're in a poor place. You don't have much. Well, why not go to the rich white West? Why not? Why not? And it's almost a duty, if not an obligation, to do it. And you just have to get past the, if there's any hesitation, say, from any of your family members, you ignore that. Do people die en route to there, drown in the Mediterranean or something? Well, yeah, but look, that's a risk worth taking. And they try, and it's a pure fantasy, of course, the movie, as you can imagine. It's propaganda. But they try and bury and ignore the dangers. You're breaking into a country illegally. Who cares? Who cares? And they try and glamorize it and show that if you're a young black man going to the West, then not only are you a bit of a hero and one sort of heavy hitting tough dude, but you're really, you're showing those white people who's really the boss around here. And also you're doing something to help your family. Your poor mother, huh? You're going to the West, you're sending her back money. And look how she's going to stand so tall in the village, that mud hut village. My son's in the West and he's an important kick-ass gangster or something. And he sends me money and look how important I am. It's a bragging rights thing as well. The same as it is in any poor country, India, the same. Now, the region of this one movie that I flicked through a number of them, but there's one that I sort of focused on or grabbed my attention because the propaganda was maybe more adroitly put. It focuses on a bunch of young black, well, they're not men, youths, between, say, 16 and 18 years old, that sort of age group in a poor African country, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Poor African country where the annual per capita income is less than $2,000, where people are living in mud huts, hand to mouth, shanty towns, and so on, and they all have mobile phones, strangely enough, and good quality ones. So they're able to look at white Western lifestyles, what it's like to live in the West. They're obviously mesmerized by, well, I want that. I want that waterfront mansion. I want those hot looking cars. I want to be able to swagger down the street. I want, the hot white chicks, and I want all that. And all I got to do is go there and get it. And everyone's encouraging me to do it. Now, the misrepresentation is off the charts. So, for example, the young black men depicted are all very clean cut, very well behaved. They go to school. They're diligent, conscientious. They're studious. They're hardworking. They're good employees that do what the boss tells them. They're good sons to their mother, and they're yes mum and all this sort of thing. And they're now, if that is the typical third world African, then wow, they're not sending any of those people, or if they are, it's hardly any people to the west. It's quite the opposite. These are these people are all Islamic as well, which they play down. They barely touch on that in the movie, even though Islam's the religion in this place. So this idea of this, and you get the same thing in the propaganda movies we see or adverts and so on we see in the West. It's only ever the white people that are bad and misbehaving and crude and vulgar. It's always the black and the brown people who are immaculately turned out, beautifully well spoken, and spend a lot of time in the gym to boot. And they're the ones that are the moral superiors here, and where the white people are the moral motherfucking Nazi inferiors. And the same sort of juxtaposition really is put here. Incredibly clean cut and well spoken, well behaved, studious, diligent, all this sort of stuff. Now, if indeed those were the people that Africa was sending to the West, then I don't think we'd have any problems with it. There wouldn't be many of those. I mean, how many, in all my time of going to the United States, and I was going there for a long time, I don't think I met more than one or two well-spoken, well-turned-out black people. And even the ones that seemed fair enough, that they had jobs as, quite basic entry-level jobs anyway, say at the five-star hotels and that sort of thing. They were driving the limo to the airport to pick people up and drop them off. That was their job. But as soon as you got away from that sort of thing, I remember the African American who was driving a local tourist bus around, I think it was Austin or somewhere like that in Texas. The guy was fucking feral, for goodness sakes. So the idea that these well-educated, well-turned-out, well-spoken, well-behaved black people are coming to the West, that's bullshit, absolute bullshit. So that's number one. And if they were that way and so well-behaved and so studious and conscientious, there wouldn't be a problem. Now, this particular African region is interesting itself. They got independence they were colonized by Europe, or really the main port town was colonized. The interior really wasn't. It was the main port town was colonized by white Europeans. But the Europeans packed up and left in 1958. So the place has been independent for, going on 70 years. They've had massive Western handouts, the United Nations and refugee relief or handouts to do with, say, if they have famines or the rainfall drops below a certain level. Now, when the Europeans quit, the population of this area was 2.5 million. So it was a reasonably prosperous area. The Europeans set up, fishing ports and extensive areas of agriculture, corn and sorghum, and that sort of stuff. And at the time, they were exporting quite a lot of food, so that it was a reasonably prosperous part of Africa anyway. There was an elite that had all been Western educated, so when the West quit this area, you could say that their chances were reasonable. But like all places in Africa, they've turned it into a third world failed state basket case shithole with the black administration. So the population that was 2.5 million in 1958 is now 18.5 million. So 70 years on, the population's increased by 8 times, 800% population increase in that time. So the place has gone from being prosperous and self-sufficient and exporting to being dirt fucking shithole poor, exporting nothing because they consume everything, and they're having to import vast amounts of food to feed their populace. The place is a bankrupt basket case. It's crime ridden. It's a fucking disaster on every imaginable level. Yet somehow these young black men are depicted as super well behaved. They all have jobs. They go, part-time jobs. They go to school and very well behaved, clean cut young men, which they're not. I mean, if you look at the the newsreels or the videos of the area, it seems to be that the whole place is one big gangster operation, and it is an out of control shithole with nothing but riots and murders and goodness knows what going on all the time. So this depiction of very well behaved young men is bullshit. Now the government there, and indeed, if you look at the wider sort of social economics of this, what is the solution for a place like this where the population has increased by 800% in 70 years? If the population had stayed more or less, a few million, when the whites quit the place, then they could have stayed somewhat at African terms, at least somewhat prosperous. Everyone had enough to eat, and they were exporting. But this is not the case anymore, far from it. So you've got all these people. What do you do with them? You can't feed them. There's no means this country can afford to keep importing the amount of food that they need to feed the populace. So what do? Somehow they've got to reduce. The only solution they have is to become fully westernized. It's not going to happen in a corrupt African basket case play. It isn't going to happen. And all the investment money, all the money that pours in from the West is corruptly wasted by the corrupt black government and useless, incompetent, corrupt black government. So what do you do with all these people? They've got, just in this area alone of Africa, they've got somewhere in the order of 12 to 13 million completely surplus people, completely surplus. There's no jobs, they're not needed, they can't be fed, and they're just wandering around causing trouble. What do you do with them? Well, I know, says the globalist cabal, surplus population. There's a shitload of floor sweepers and toilet cleaners here, people that can work in, the sub industries of takeout food, and we'll just import them into the West as neo slave labor. That's what hey, solution done. So we'll just bring them in as refugees and so on. Now, this is something that this movie harped on. The kids or the young men are saying, well, I just want a better life. That's all. I just want a better life. But you're an African illiterate fucking peasant born in Africa. That is your life. Everybody wants to go to a rich country where streets are paved with gold and with a gimme, 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 gimme attitude. Everybody wants that. But they don't mention the slave, the slave trader type people, the people movers, the NGOs, the NGO agitators and stirrers, and so that facilitate and encourage these young people to make the journey, and then point out where the way stations are, where they'll be given food and clothing. There's no, hey, these people are saying they'll give me nice, designer label clothes, free food, free water, free shelter, and they'll get me into the West. Hey, why not? Now, at the same time, they're trying to say that these young men are working at all these jobs somehow while they're at school, working all these jobs in a place where unemployment is like 90%, but somehow these young men have got jobs and they're getting money, and they're squirreling the money away until they've got enough to pay people smugglers. That's not stated directly, but it's kind of inferred. But the people smugglers, they can somehow get to the Mediterranean coast of North Africa, this is, and then they've got to pay someone who's got a boat to get them across into Europe. But somehow all the other stuff's going to be for free. This is not stated directly that these are all United Nations NGO, Soros NGOs that are actually doing the conveying. So they leave out the agitators, the globalists, people that are stirring up these illiterate peasants into going. So there's a lot of fantasy, a lot of absurd characterization and depiction of people. If there are such clean-cut, studious and diligent and well-behaved young men in Africa, then well, why don't they? Hey, there should be recruiting stations, from Europe going to Africa to get these people. But if there's even 0.1% of these people that meet that category, then that would be it. So the tiny number of Africans. But if you look at this, this issue of Africa, the surplus populations all over Africa, where the populations have increased by many hundreds of percent over the years, while the European populations have stayed more or less stable. This is the issue. Why was it allowed for these populations to increase to such an extent when clearly there was not even the slightest ability of those regions to support that many people? They're only being kept going on life support of food handouts from the United Nations and the like. So what are they going to do about this massive procreation in these areas, which is creating surplus populations of enormous proportions? And no one knows what to do with them except to send them into the rich white economies until black people and brown people constitute 80-90% of the Western European population. So the only solution the globalists have is to shove this surplus population into the most productive economies of the world and turning them, of course, into very unproductive economies and turning them into the same basket cases that these people are trying to get away from. You're being attached to us today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.